Hi, everyone. I'm Kerry Mapes. I work with NCAUG. I'm also a member of the NCAUG board, and I think Matt was plugging our scholarship earlier. So I actually also am a recipient of an NCAUG scholarship. So I think that is a great program. Absolutely, we should be promoting that across the board. So I have my background in GIS and remote sensing. I have been Part 107 licensed since 2017. And heavily involved in the drone industry. So I'm excited to just ask you guys a few questions today, which I actually generated with ChatGPT. So absolutely. Yes, yeah, ChatGPT is a great resource if you're not using it yet. So I'm curious, what do you see as being some of the biggest challenges to the drone industry right now?
Hello. So hi, everyone. My name is Thomas. I also work for NCAUG as a technical solutions architect. I've been working on developing our drone program and collecting data and everything. But yeah, so as for Kerry's question about what I find the most difficult thing about UAV technology is just the multidisciplinary aspect of it. You know, they're so broadly applicable to study almost anything on Earth. And so when you're combining, you know, social sciences, environmental sciences, engineering and construction, plus computer science, it's just a lot of disciplines there. And so it can be challenging at times to gain confidence in specific areas that you may not have any familiarity with at all. So that's just my thoughts.
And I'll piggyback on that as well. The disciplines, the outreach, you don't know what you don't know. And there's a lot of people that look at drones and just say, oh, pretty picture. It is, but some of these pictures are worth more than 1,000 words. Some of them are worth no words at all until 5 years down the road, and then you can compare them. But the outreach, letting people know that you do have this capability. This is what it's used for. This is what it could be used for. There's a lot of people that aren't in the drone industry that, you know, people in the industry, yes, we know that A plus B can equal C, but there's a lot of people on the outside that just have never seen this technology and don't know how it applies to what they do specifically. Also, I'll say the cost. As a government employee, we don't exactly have the biggest budget, and we don't always get all the toys. So cost, it's a piece of technology. Every year there's a new car. Every year there's a new TV. Every year there's a new phone. Every year there's a new drone. There's a new sensor. And these aren't cheap. You know, you've got a $30,000 platform back there that somebody's going to tell you in 3 years, we're going to do it again. Now, Steve Jobs may get away with it on a $1,000 iPhone every year, but you're not going to want to spend $30,000 every 3 years to get the new hotness. So right now, since it is such a new technology, the cost of it, bringing that down would be greatly beneficial.
I'll add to it. We'll go in line. Those are awesome points. I think the regulation side's something that's also interesting to follow. I think everybody always heard initially, you can't fly drones over people, can't fly them over moving cars. Then you kind of hear a little gray area of you can move over moving traffic if you notify them. You know, is that through large DOT 46-inch signs, you know, UAS in the air? Some of that, I call it gray area with the FAA, is how do we interpret, how do we perform our responsibilities to keep surveyors, employees, staff out of harm's way, but also educate the public on something is going on above you, but at the same time, we don't want our drivers staring up in the sky at the larger platforms we have, causing a distraction of them. So that's just where I'm curious of seeing where it goes. How do we as pilots do a better job of, as you're saying, informing the public of what we're doing, but also not inhibiting their daily routine if it is on a I-440 or 85 traffic job?
Certainly planning and budgeting for future technologies. I think earlier getting on, you'd be like, okay, well, we spent $2K on a DJI drone. We did it. We're done. All right, where's my ROI on this? You're like, well, we're going to do this, and this, and just planning and getting the understanding that this is a continuous active process to be able to keep up with the technology and expand the reaches of those technologies. So starting in one vertical, you may branch out to 5 other ones, but they may require 5 different drones in order to be able to accommodate that. I would add on the other side, on the regulatory side, remote ID. That's going to probably be a larger disruptor than we're even thinking about right now. Certainly thinking how to retrofit your current fleet. Also, well, gosh, I guess we just get rid of these P4Ps we've had for a while. Is it worth adding like a little beacon tag to that, or drone tag beacon to be able to keep up with that? So there's a lot of different changing, shifting pieces there as it comes to the technology. Certainly the AI integration is coming more and more. That day when we fly a drone and it auto detects not just, shapes, cars, people, can follow you, those sort of things used for recreational purposes, but can make real-time decisions as part of that. Certainly with a lot of the stuff going on with computer vision systems, it's very intriguing where that's going to go as part of it.
Coming online.
September 16th.
Do you see that being postponed?
No.
Yeah, you think it's pretty firm on that one?
I do. They're like the ones I know of for the FAA that have been pre-approved for those tags. I was looking at this yesterday. That's what's topical. But the drone tags seem to be the best one in either getting the beacon or their mini, which does have LTE broadcast capabilities. But if you ask yourself, well, why get one or the other? You're like, well, I'm not going to fly beyond visual line of sight. I'm not going to fly a drone that requires that and the LTE connection. Well, gosh, I can just get with a cheaper one as part of that. It's going to get convoluted fast. One thing is, you have a blue UAS that is in direct conflict with the FAA and what they're saying about remote ID. Is that going to be a waiver process? I don't know about you, but that clock's ticking. I'm just now like, I was waiting to kick the can down the road. I'm not going to lie. Now I'm like, oh, I need to actively think about and address this. Or do we just figure out another way to find compliance thereof?
So that'll bring me to my next question, because I noticed, a lot of the discussion about the challenges is centered on the advancements of technology. But on the other end, what are you most excited about when it comes to, the new drone technologies and, integrations with other technologies or, systems?
Yeah, I'll start that off and parrot something I said earlier, computer vision systems and being able to in real time detect not just small objects, but changes in vegetation, those sort of things. And they always talk about this AI, where it goes, oh yeah, we'll AI about it. And you're like, it takes a lot of data. It's going to take several years to collect all that data for specific applications. And I do see a time in the future, you're like, well, we need to know if there's a certain invasive species out here. Let's just go fly the drone over real quick with video. Okay, we got it. And be done. I would love to get to that point, but is that 10 years in the future, 20 years in the future? Who knows?
Yeah, I agree with you. The environmental aspect to me is just phenomenal, because as the world turns, we build more houses and roadways and crunch those little environmental areas to even smaller. So being able to track them, clean them up and fix them, to me is phenomenal, because it's having an impact that, you see drones as being for construction, surveying, monitoring, mapping, but the things on the environmental side have that long impact. So it's pretty awesome. So kudos.
And I'll continue on with that. It is the digital age. Everything is a form of data one way or another. And at this point, you're not getting rid of data. You probably have more data sitting on a defunct server somewhere than you currently have on your laptop. But it's still, that data is valuable. And when you're monitoring, are you monitoring for 5 years? Are you monitoring for 10 years? If you just have data from 10 years ago, you have that data. It's not going anywhere. It's not taking up your physical space. To be able to minimize those data necessities and requirements, I think that'd be great. Everybody loves getting gigs of data and great dense point clouds. If it didn't have to take up gigs of data, that'd be great. Right now, everybody plans for having a day of flight and a day of post-processing. If you're able to turn and burn and go and fly multiples of hundreds of acres and live stream or rapid post-process, like what the gentleman were talking about with AI, and be able to give that product in the same day, you have just eliminated months of in the field, on the ground by multiple people and different constituents. So just the efficiency of the process, it's requiring less moving parts, and it's getting better.
Yeah, so I guess what excites me in terms of technologies that are coming down the pipe, there are a few that I've had my eye on just from attending different conferences throughout the state. And one of them is neural radiance fields. I think those are really interesting. People are kind of saying it's kind of like the next generation of a point cloud. So instead of using points, it uses voxels, which are like 3-dimensional pixels. And neural radiance fields also have the ability to recreate highly reflective surfaces. So you could have like a mirrored ball here and create a neural radiance field. And as you move around, it would actually dynamically adjust. The reflection in that ball would adjust for what perspective you're looking at it from. So I think that's a really cool technology coming out. It exists right now, but I think it's got a lot of room for blowing up. And then BIMs as well. Building information models are extremely detailed depending on your data collection, 3D versions of infrastructure. So, I've seen some demonstrations where, people are, you have this 3D exterior model of a building, but then you can strip away the exterior layers to view floor by floor, see the floor plan, zoom in, pull the wall off, see how much concrete is in that building, see how much the piping networks, the electricity, everything. So I think as we move into sort of this digital twin concept, I think that's really exciting. I think there's a lot of room for efficiencies going down that path.
Thank you. So next question, a little more basic, but I think a lot of people here may be relatively new to drones or, have had, a little bit, but are looking to get more involved in the industry. So what advice do you have for people who are just starting out or like relatively new in their field with drones?
My advice would be get to know people that have more experience. They are going to have gone through a lot of the learning processes that you may be about to go into, and can provide really good feedback and prevent some time lost and effort lost in trying to learn. And then, just ask a lot of questions. As I'm sure you can tell from some of the things we've talked about today, there's a lot of specifics that go into, what drone platform you're going to use, what sensor you're going to use, what you're studying. So I would say for me, what I found the most growth is from communicating with peers, attending events like this and other conferences, and just really, forming that network of people that you can bounce questions off of whenever you have them.
I was about to say, I think it's a ditto on all that for all of us.
Good job.
It's, just seeing platforms, like I'm excited to talk to Matt about the census. It's like, I don't think anybody's an enemy or competitor when it comes to conferences and drone knowledge. It's all educate each other to gain the public's knowledge, and we all get lifted up together.
I would say another part of that too. There's so many different specialties. I think people look at the industry and they're like, oh, you just do all of this. And the reality is each one of us here at the table has other types of specialties within drones. I think as the career path there matures, that's going to continue to deviate. Are you going to become someone who does like vision systems type of stuff? Well, that's a whole other separate skill set than doing the piloting there. If you can build the software to help with the pilot to be able to do that. And I would say the one thing that I always recommend especially for pilots or people wanting to get into drones, get a drone, buy a decent one, spend more than you think you probably should. I'm dead serious about that part. And then just fly and just do it until it gets really boring, and then challenge yourself and find other ways and avenues to be able to do that. That's what's really going to spur you forward there.
Take a minute to think on it. Like what Matt was saying, yes, if you're going to get into it, definitely dive into it and don't skip on it. Get a good drone, but also know your limitations or set your boundaries. What only you can decide, what am I really going to do with this drone? If you're the pilot, are you just out here to fly a drone? Are you just out here to maybe take a picture of your dog on a hike? Then just buy a DJI, that's fine. But also don't go buy a DJI if you're going to go approach location and survey or professional land surveyors and say, oh, I took this image over here with my Mini. Can I come work for you? They're not gonna you need to make sure you have the right tool for the job, but also understand what you're trying to get into. Set those parameters for yourself. If you know that you're only going to be a recreationist or a hobbyist, then that's totally fine. But don't go buy a $50,000 drone for your recreation and hobbies when you could benefit from other things in that capacity. So just do your research. Buy the necessary tools, but do your research, know what you're really going to do with it. Like what Matt was saying, do you buy this platform even though you know you're never going to fly it beyond visual line of sight? If you're not going to use it, don't pay for it. Buy something that's more applicable. Save your money. You may crash it. You may need a new battery, and they're not cheap. So make sure you're being diligent with how you're getting into it.
So that's actually a perfect segue into my next topic, since you mentioned drone crashes. And I think it's always an interesting perspective to share our experience in having kind of, incidents or accidents, drone crashes out in the field, because if you're flying long enough, I think eventually you will have a crash or some type of technological mishap happen while the drone is in the air. And so, sometimes they're human error and they're avoidable. Sometimes they're, just equipment failure, but that can be intimidating to a lot of people. So are any of you able to share a time where you've had any type of accidents out in the field, and how did you handle that as it happened?
Maybe not as bad as it could have been, but also anytime you start to see your $1,000 investment do something in the air that is not what you planned, you immediately, stop, reboot, land it. Just absolutely land it. We went to go spray one of our plots one time, and we started out with a full 100% charge on our 50-volt battery, and 15 seconds into launch, that dropped down to 43 volts, which is less than 45% of our battery. And we had already flown it, 200 feet away. So things and stuff start beeping on the computer, beeping on the, and it's just bring it back and set it down before anything worse goes. But also you live and you learn. There's drone insurance, and I don't mean to say that lightly, but also it's better to have and not need than to need not have. But I've been there. I loaded up my drone full of pesticides, started trying to fly off. It'd go up 30 feet. It's supposed to transition and start flying away, and it kept going up. That's we're not spraying from up there, so I'm gonna need you to come back down and land immediately. So it happens. It does happen.
Okay, yeah. So I've had one so far. I'm not sure it's bound to happen again because things happen, but one crash. Luckily, it was a relatively inexpensive piece of equipment. So right after I graduated with my undergrad, I went to Southern California, worked for a nonprofit, and we were doing. So my primary role was to do invasive species treatment, which is a fancy term for you're brush cutting the same plant all day, every day for 6 months. But I noticed that there's a DJI case laying in the lab, and I was like, hey, what's that? And this ranch was managed by an older couple. And so the man was the sort of property manager. He would take care of stuff. And so he came to me and said, yeah, I bought this thing. We were hoping we could use it for habitat monitoring. I have no idea how to use it. I took it out of the box, put it in the sky. Well, not in the sky, put it up like 5 feet and crash it into a tree immediately and put it back in the box. And so it wasn't my primary responsibility. I guess this kind of goes back to the second question, is whenever there are opportunities, or the previous topic was whenever there are opportunities to engage with drones, take it if you're interested. And so, it wasn't my job responsibility to fly drones, but they let me, I just was interested, took it out of the box, and they let me do some test flights and stuff like that. And so on one of these test flights, it was way too windy. Keep in mind, I had no prior experience to this. Nobody in the area was a pilot or anything, or it was like I didn't have any formal training. Let's just say that. And so it was like way too windy to be flying. Wasn't quite aware. And then with it being one of my first times flying the Phantom or a drone in general, I didn't realize, like, as the drone's orientation changes, forward on the left stick or on the right stick to go forward can mean towards you, away. It can be wherever the drone is facing. And so, I think I'm going forward. I think the drone's coming towards me and just boom, right into a tree. There was also a moment of a little bit of panic there. And so I learned a lot from that. I learned not just about the orientation, but how to handle when your drone is doing things that you don't want it to do in a more effective way so that you can regain control of the situation.
Yeah, I'll add to that. I mean, it's kind of like the pilot training for us sometimes is causing things to happen in a safe area to see how your pilots respond to it. And with that, we call them SOPs or standard operation procedures. Through previous experience, I've had a couple platforms of quite a high value come out of the sky, mainly because of platform error, ESC motors dying, large copters coming out of the air because of it. Companies might tout that a hexacopter or a 4-rotor platform can fly aloft with one prop down, but when we put these heavy scanners underneath that system, it does cause issues. So every time I've seen something happen, it's always typically a platform issue, and those will come back to us. Manufacturer explains why. But having a situation in place that if a drone does come out of the sky and lands in the woods, what's the first step to do? Who do you contact? Who on your team is going to take pictures of it? Because you hate to say that the stuff's never going to happen, but if it does, where it happens to be in a parking lot underneath the site you're flying, make sure your team has some documentation of step 1, notify authorities if it hit a car or something. Step 2, just watch your order of events, because no one ever wants someone to get in a wreck when you're driving to a job site, but it happens. And most companies have a policy for who to contact. So same thing with a drone. You pray it never happens, but in a course of action that it does, make sure your team's aware of what to do.
I would say the longer you fly, the more nervous you actually become. And there's also a couple hills and curves that go with that. It is a mechanical thing. You are flying the sky. Nothing is natural about this. One, going out there and making sure that you're always being aware. It's really, really easy, especially when you're doing monotonous flight missions, to just kind of zone out a little bit or not be paying attention. And you can always create a couple near misses due to that. The other I say is treat your batteries well. That's the lifeblood. That's the thing you're most concerned. The airframes, like you said, it's possible the ASA could go out. It's possible one of the rotors can burn out. More than likely, it's going to be a battery issue. Treat them well. If you go, that's got a little bit of a puffiness to it, it's gone. You put that away, you recycle that battery, it is out of commission. And also just keeping up with the batteries. Are they hot? Are they cold? I like to put them, if I'm out mobilely working, put them on the floorboard, run AC on them if it's in the warmer months, to be able to cool those batteries down. That way they can wait to then get charged as part of that, and treating that at the assembly line process thereof. I would say from a personal experience, one event I'll share is, it was early on, it was like 2017. We were ramping up for a project to map a whole lot of different houses down after a storm event. So I was out there with my personal drone. There was a P4P, the Black Obsidian one at the time, or the P4, the Black Obsidian one. I'm like trying to figure out what are the proper input parameters. In this case, we were using drone deploy as part of this for the flight planning to go out and collect that. I go, well, let me see if I can fly 100 feet. I'm looking at my house. I'm looking at a bunch of tall pine trees by my house. I'm like, that's about 100 feet. That'd be good. All right. Input AGL 100 feet, go up. It's mapping, it's mapping, it's mapping. All of a sudden you hear beep, 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 doom. You're like, what was that? So luckily we were able to recover the drone magically. I was really very surprised by that. Lesson learned is, if you think it's 100 feet, you should probably deconflict 150 feet. I like to share that one. That's a real world life lesson right there as part of that one.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys. I think that's our time. Do you have a question?
I wanted to add, have you guys also experienced any kind of like data loss with that? So not only maybe like hardware, but any software issues that you've had with, I don't know, just mishaps, technology being technology, things like that you've experienced, and how to get around that?
I'll give a couple examples thereof. So one part we do is best practices, especially for mapping for the day, and it's not somewhere like close by. I take that data, I run it in Pix 4D Mapper just to make sure it aligns, and we have that there. Quality QA checks, so backing up. I'm a big stickler on this, so give me a second to nerd out. You have the DCIM folder that it gets created in. You take that and you rename that DCIM folder to a year, month, date, project description, area, whatever you're doing for that day. You copy that to a solid state drive. Then from there, I disconnect that. I take my solid state drive. So now I've carried data redundancy as part of this, and then take it and maybe process in the computer preliminarily just to run that alignment, because the one time you don't do that is when it will bite you. I've certainly had a project where we got there at the end, did our final QA. We were hungry. It was a long day. Okay, let's just double check and make sure. Sure enough, the last 50 images of a crucial area, for whatever reason, the white balance went off and it was just whited out on those images. We were able to go back, plan a smaller flight plan, collect that little strip right there. Why did that happen? But it happened that day. So constant QA.
And then again, on the hardware side, with a lot of these systems being PPK or RTK, one thing that we found out with the M300 is that preferably I don't like the DJI RTK base station, if you can even call it a base station. Using VRS with the M300 was a great way to know that you're acquiring data that's fixed, but secondly, having your own PPK static GPS running in the background. So for say, if you go through a VRS float situation, you can decide to process that data with the PPK solution instead. So kind of having two systems of data processing when it comes to airborne LiDAR. Usually I recommend having two base stations in case one of the batteries dies. You've got a second setup going on there, because the drone may function perfectly, but it's that secondary piece of equipment that's not connected with the drone that could fail you. Good NCVRS RTC M32, because it does matter with the M300, which actually, I guess you could say, port you log in with. And if anybody has one, I can definitely share you. It took us some trials of learning what communication channel does it like. But usually in North Carolina, we've had, just as you do with GPS, great success with having a fixed in-air connection.
And I would also hazard to say, the only thing that is worth more and is smaller than the sensor is the actual SD card. You need to make sure that you not only, if you're going to have data redundancy over here, you still have to have an SD card to hold that data before you get it to your solid state drive. And then you have to usually delete that data off your SD card. SD cards out the wazoo. I know that Thomas Walls, one of my UAS program managers, rolls around with a Yeti package, just 24 SD cards, ranging from various gigs to multiple gigs. You never know how many gigs. You don't have a great idea until you're out there. You may overfly on an SD card and not acquire the back half of a mission. You may overwrite a mission that you didn't realize was still on an SD card. So just like your naming conventions for once you get it off the drone, that little intermediate piece of actually getting the data physically out of the drone from that SD card is almost equally as valuable in making sure that you've got to have that SD card before you can never even get it to the computer. And I've seen more SD cards fly out of people's hands, dropped in grass. It's like looking for a ring at the beach. You're never going to find that thing again. So having orange SD cards also is a great experience.
Yeah, those are all really, really good points. It'd be redundant if I just kept talking about redundancy, but I think that's really like the key for avoiding data loss is to make sure you have backups of your backups. And as for the SD card thing, get little stickers for your SD cards, 1, 2, 3, 4, label them all so you know which one's which. We do that at GOL. It helps out. But yeah, I mean, that's all I really have to say. I mean, just like echo all the great points that everybody else made. Like,
All right, thanks. And I think we have one more question from the audience.
As long as it doesn't keep us past agenda. I was told it doesn't. So
Go for it.
okay. So I was just hoping to hear what your favorite use case for your work is, whether it's a customer request or just general type of work, or area to work in. Just what's your favorite job?
yeah, awesome. I like that question. So my background is in ecology and conservation biology. So a lot of my favorite work is working with invasive species. So, we just learned about Phragmites. That's actually what I did my undergrad senior project on, was mapping Phragmites. So anything involving natural resources, ecosystems, stuff like that. I really, really like. But I also really love 3D data. So when we go out and we fly like even just a subdivision or something like that, mapping out power lines, building footprints, all the infrastructure, I find that stuff really like it's cathartic in a way for me. Just seeing the organized nature of all of it. So I would say those two things.
While I thoroughly love flying the herbicide applicator, that's definitely been a dream. Don't get me wrong. I'm a geographer by trade. I have an undergrad in applied geography and a geosciences MS, and I love imagery, just imagery in general. If we're going to take one picture and then stitch it to 500 others to make one more bigger, I love maps. So if I can map anything and everything, that's just the principle of very relaxing watching all these flight lines come together and thousands of tiny pictures still coming together, making one big picture. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and I love looking at maps, and every picture is worth 1,000 words. It's mapping something different. So you can get something different from it than the next guy, but it's still the same map. So I just enjoy making maps out of everything.
Yeah, it's a good question. You see what we're all passionate about. We all like sit up and get excited. I get excited about trees. My background's in forest management, registered forester, and still doing some research at NC State. So using drones to help foresters who typically it's a very low technology industry, very budget unfriendly. Nobody wants to spend money when it comes to timber harvesting or procurement, but using drones to map areas like what you're doing, but for monitoring tree production and helping profession that has a very low staff cover more ground to help us produce the volume of needs this world needs with the production of houses and everything else going on. So if you like trees and want to talk to them about me, holler, I'm here.
I've really come to learn to love the photogrammetry and the process thereof. Really just taking the scattered images, pulling them into like a 2D, 3D product. I get a lot of satisfaction out of that. Less so with LiDAR. I don't know what it is. I just gravitate that way. It's more interesting to me in that capacity as part of that. Yeah.
All right, thank you guys. And I think we're at time now. So thank you for participating in the discussion.
Thank you, Kerry, and panelists. We appreciate it. That was awesome. Next, we're going to jump into sponsor parade. So we really appreciate our sponsors and everything they do for us here. So you guys, sponsors, kind of line up here and we'll do like our few-minute spiel about our companies here. And so I'm Richard Fogelman. I'm with AECOM. I work the same company that Matt and Annie does. And real quick about AECOM. AECOM's global GIS digital team includes over 2,000 practitioners working with hundreds of clients in state, federal, and local communities. Our disciplines include environment, transportation, water, as well as our buildings and places group. Here in North Carolina, we have over 400 employees based out of Charlotte, Wilmington, and Raleigh. Our local staff have performed geospatial related services for numerous state and local government agencies in North Carolina, some for over 20 years we've been working together. And we just appreciate the opportunity to be here. And thank you very much.